Going live.
They want to, they should ride on my bike. Go ahead. So.
Yeah.
Did you do it?
Don't get tired. You still get hot now.
Did you bring your mic?
Yeah, everyone, it's in there. I know,
That pretty orange one?
that pretty orange one. It's long.
Yeah.
So we can-
So it's not like he just. But we can say it's 84.
70 pounds, but has a
Yeah.
battery that goes 50 miles.
There you go. Yeah, that's.
So now call to order the meeting of the Winter City Council on Tuesday, August 6th.
Councilmember Anderson,
Here.
Councilmember Lauren,
Here,
Councilmember New,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cowan,
Here.
and Mayor Yazzie.
Here. Thank you. Abigail Artist, would you lead us in pledge of allegiance, please?
oh, I remember it.
No,
I do. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, there are no changes to the agenda.
Move for approval. Second.
Second.
Then on to the second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we will move on to council staff comments. Councilmember Lauren.
I just have a few things. First, in July, I had a little public safety meeting with the chief. The 22nd of July, the WRA, GSA combined meeting on groundwater. On the 24th, I was so lucky to attend the housing meeting and meeting on homelessness. And I learned that we only see 18% of the homeless. So when we see them, they represent 18%. But on the 26th of July, the League of California Cities had a meeting here, and I just wanted to give a big shout out to all the people that helped. So there's so many people. Bill Biasi, our mayor, gave a kickoff. It was fantastic. Marie Rojo, Heilman, and the Buckhorn Truck did the food. Turkovich, RV Screen Printing, Eagle Drug, Chamber of Commerce, First Northern Bank, all contributed to the swag bag. Also, Hotel Winters, Elisa Dennis, they gave a tour. PG&E gave a tour. Corinne Martinez and all the folks at Berryessa Gap, they gave us a tour. I think that League of Cities people liked that part the most. But our great city manager gave a bus tour, and as did Doggo, and led them all around so they could learn about agriculture around our area in the city winters. And finally, Lester Farms made fruit bars for everybody so they could have like a taste of winters. And Al Vallecillo and Denise Cottrell and city staff helped prepare and clean up for the event. So I just wanted to give a big shout out to everybody who helped on the 26th. And then on August 5th, I met with City Manager John Levy on tonight's agenda. I also met with Supervisor Saylor that day just to get an update, and also the Hispanic Advisory Committee. So it was a little bit of a busy end of July. So thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot to report. My name is, good meeting with the city manager this afternoon.
Great, thank you. Councilmember New.
Thank you. On the 18th of July, went to the training for appropriate behavior.
Sexual harassment.
Did you get that in the minutes?
On the 1st of August, met with Sandy Vickery about ADUs and an item that's on the agenda tonight. And then on the 1st of July, also I went to the SACOG land use and natural resources meeting, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. On the 6th, that was the morning, and that was John, talked to about the meeting tonight. But being that each time that my turn to talk about what I've been doing, I've been talking about the land use or SACOG and the numbers that we're going to get for housing. And so I have a little bit of an update now. If I gave you everything, it would be 2 hours, but you'll get the very, very short 3-page, only highlighted parts. So the whole thing was that the RENA numbers are supposed to increase the housing supply and mix of housing types and tenure and affordability, promote infill development, which I think is an important thing that we realize, socioeconomic equality, and protect environmental and agricultural resources, and encourage effective development patterns in our planning. So I think that as we work and look at the numbers that we get, which aren't really going to be very bad, we have to make sure that we keep these in mind. And they're also important for improving relationship between jobs and housing. That's one of the main things that they have for standards for the RENA numbers. And balancing disproportionate household income distribution. So that's what's going to be probably hardest for us, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And the affirmative housing is also very important. But the numbers come out, and we don't have the exact number that we're going to have, but the numbers are not scary, like thousands or it probably is going to be in the 400 or 500 house range, and over the years that's not too bad. The breakdown, though, is what's kind of hard to take, is that above moderate income, and that anything that for moderate income, the median income for our area, I don't know what it is, but anything above 120% of the median income is considered above moderate. So we can have 41% of our houses in that area. But 80 to 100%, 80 to 120% of the median income is the moderate. And we have 16 or 17.6%. Low, we can have 15.3%, and very low, 25.4%. However, we also have a 5% penalty. And if that is included, then those numbers go higher. And the very low also includes extremely low. And that's something I don't think I've heard of before. And the extremely low fits in with the very low, except that has to be 14.4% of the houses. So that is where we're going to have to work hard to get all the low-cost houses in. And other than that, just want to do the housing element updates. Jurisdictions have to adopt the housing element and demonstrate, among other things, how it can accommodate its assigned RENA numbers through its zoning. The state reviews each jurisdiction's housing element for compliance. And the jurisdiction must adopt housing elements by August 2021. So that's my report.
Thank you.
That doesn't look like a sincere thank you.
Very
Thank
much. I know we'll be hearing a lot more about it in the future. Just seriously.
Sorry about that.
Mayor Pro Tem Kelley.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. On the 18th, I also attended the sex training. And, first, I met with Sandy Vickery regarding her concerns with the Airbnb ordinance. On the second, I met with the mayor and the city manager to discuss a meeting the city manager had with some citizens regarding the north area. On the third, I attended the Alvarino stroll. It's always a great event, and I think it's the 4th year. And then I was able to attend a soft opening for Patio 29, Winter's very own distillery. Place is really nice. Jeff and Anita Boone are the owners, and they're hoping to have a ribbon cutting and grand opening real soon, in the next couple of weeks, I believe. But do the wine stroll and the distillery in the same day, you need a ride home. I did. Yesterday, I met with the city manager to review tonight's agenda, and then also managed to make the ribbon cutting just a little bit ago at the high school.
Thank you. On July 23rd, I attended the planning commission meeting. On the 26th, I was at the League of California Cities Sac Valley meeting here at City Hall. And I want to say thank you to Councilmember Lauren, City Manager Don Levy, for all your work put into the planning and arranging all that. I think everything turned out fine. We had a lot of positive comments from people all over our area here that came to town and got to see the projects we have going. And it was very well done. On the 2nd, I met with the city manager and Mayor Pro Tem to discuss the housing issues with the North Area Planning. On the 5th, I met with the city manager to go over tonight's agenda. Also on the 3rd, I attended the Alvarenga Wine Stroll. I don't know exactly the numbers, but the numbers I'm hearing are somewhere around 400 people that attended. And as I went through it and I looked around, there were a lot of people that came from out of town to see what Winters has. And I think our businesses downtown did a very good job putting that together. And at 6 o'clock this evening, I was also at the ribbon cutting at the high school. Got a quick preview of one of their buildings. It's very impressive what they're building down there. So I think they're doing very good, making progress. And the school opens, I believe, next week. So they were really scrambling to get those 2 buildings done. They did a very good job. That's what I have to report tonight. All right, we're going to move on to public comments for anything that is not on the agenda tonight. I have one here from Tina Loudon.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Tina Loudon, and hello to the city council members. My husband and I live on Neiman Street and are concerned about the volume of the fast traffic on Neiman. Fast traffic. School is starting. They did put a new sign in front of the FFA and letting you know how fast you're going. But it would be nice to get some police presence there. Again, fast traffic. I see dump trucks or whatever coming down, and if I had a radar, John, if I had a radar gun, I probably could punch them at 45 to 50 miles an hour. Too fast. We got a lot of kids. Our concern also is what's going to happen if we have more homes in the North Winters. And what's going to happen with the sports center off of Moody Slough. I've heard there's going to be a huge sports complex off of Moody Slough, which my husband and I did not know. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would have any comments on anything that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, please come forward. Tina, just so you know, the chief of police is here. I'm sure he heard your comments.
Miller, hello.
He's listening.
Thank you, Mayor. Kate Lanish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And just a really quick thing, looking ahead to when Winter's Commission on Aging and Adult Services. I'm sorry, I can't remember the full name, which Tina might be able to remind me of. I serve on the Disaster Preparedness Subcommittee of the Yolo County Commission on Aging and Adult Services. And there's a lot of excitement about partnering with the different city commissions on aging and adult services. There are a couple Winters representatives on the county commission. And so just something to just simply put on the radar of council and city manager and staff that the Disaster Preparedness Subcommittee is there, and we'll be excited to talk with the Winters Commission on Aging once it is here and fired up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything that's not on tonight's agenda? I do have a letter that was submitted by Emma Johnson, the editor-in-chief of the Winters Express, submitted for public comment to the Winter City Council regarding their reporting in their paper about public comments made at public meetings and council meetings, planning commission meetings, that type of thing. So I will turn that in to Tracy so you can submit that for the record. So with that, no other comments or anything not on the agenda, we will move on to the consent calendar.
Mayor and Council, a bunch of items. Item A are minutes from the regular meeting on July 16th. Item B is the purchase of a transmitter and a float for the East Street pump station. Nothing was broken. This is just part of the regular upgrades that we do as far as the advancement of our overall SCADA and telemetry systems. Item C is an in-flight sound permit. The Winters Community Thanksgiving Community Dinner is going to have a fundraiser on September 7th. It's going to be at City Park, and looks like it's going to be a food truck event. Looks fine. Items D and E. These are resolutions of the City Council basically confirming delinquencies on our utility bills for both water and sewer, and also for solid waste. Something I'd like to point out to the council, we give everybody up until what time today?
We gave them until 3 o'clock.
Until 3 o'clock. Just so the council knows, we do have updated lists. We allow people to come in and pay. So the lists that we have here are the result of people coming in, so they save themselves from the tax collector. But we do have updated lists that we will. Good, so you have them all. And then finally, items F through N. These are claims that were filed in relation to the flooding on Foxglove. This is a routine procedure at this point. Essentially, we're asking the council accept the claims, and we'll be turning these over to our insurance authority for their evaluation of things. And that's the consent calendar.
Any questions?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Bill, can you just?
Yeah.
Can you just confirm there's no public comment?
Okay. I think I have to recuse myself for item C because that's at the city park, and I believe I live too close to that. So I will not be voting on item C. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar? Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to move on to the presentations. We have a presentation from our Civic Spark Fellow on the climate resiliency toolbox.
Mayor and council members, happy to be here to introduce Sarah Emerson. She's our Civic Sparks Fellow. She's been working with our regional YOLA Resiliency Collaborative this last year. This is an ad hoc group that's been working to kind of address resiliency issues regarding heat, which we think is going to be the main impact for us regarding climate change concerns. So that regional group, the YRC, includes Yolo County, cities of Woodland, West Sac, Winters, Davis, UC Davis, the County Housing Authority, Yoshida, and Yolo Energy Watch, and the Climate Region Climate Readiness Project. So we had a great meeting last October, and we had over 38 attendees from various agencies throughout the county, and we had a really good workshop to talk about resiliency issues. And the thing that rose to the top was kind of needing some planning on how we're all going to deal with addressing being a more climate resilient communities in our various areas. And we were lucky enough to be able to hire a Civic Spark Fellow, who's Sarah, who's been with us since last September. And she was tasked with building this toolbox template so that all the cities can take the template and kind of adjust it to whatever fits their needs to help us build a resiliency plan for each of the communities. So she's just about, it's pretty much done. There's a couple elements that we didn't have time to get to, but so Sarah's been working with our regional group since starting on this project. I also like to remind you that we have our own Civic Spark Fellow that's going to be starting with the city next month, working on similar issues. That person will be here for 11 months as well. So with that, I'll leave it to Sarah to go ahead and do it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was gonna figure out slightly how this works before I give everything away. I'm giving everything away.
That's it, we're done.
Okay.
Nice presentation.
Is there a go backwards,
Yes.
Up or down?
up or down?
So, up and it'll go backwards. So you don't go down.
Okay. Progress. Great. Okay. Hi. So yes, I'm Sarah Emerson. I'm the Civic Spark Fellow for the YOLO Resiliency Collaborative. I'm excited to talk to you all today about the YRC's Resiliency Planning Toolbox. So, first, some information about the YRC. Like Carol said, it's an ad hoc organization formed in 2017 with members from jurisdictions across Yolo County. And Yolo as a region contends with severe impacts from climate change. Drought, wildfire, flooding, and extreme heat all have severe consequences that will be exacerbated in the coming years. And while Yolo as a region has done great work on climate change mitigation, there's been a gap in climate change adaptation planning. So the YRC was formed to address this gap and increase the resilience of our communities. So here are the key members of the YRC. You can see, like Carol said, the 4 cities, the county, the university, and other jurisdictions are all members of this organization. And this collaborative, multi-jurisdictional nature of the YRC is extremely important to resiliency work, as the impacts of climate change are not limited by jurisdictional boundaries. And by working together across these boundaries, we are able to foster richer conversations on resiliency and ultimately create stronger and more resilient communities. So here's the YRC's mission statement, and it emphasizes this commitment to boundary crossing and collaboration and resiliency. And these commitments inspired the YRC's stakeholder workshops, which have been attended by multi-departmental jurisdictional staff and other local stakeholders. And we recently had our second of these workshops in June 2019, where we discussed communication and outreach. And in our 2018 workshop, we decided that we would focus on heat. Or the first impact we would focus on would be heat. So why heat? Sacramento is projected to have the climate of Phoenix as early as 2050. And extreme heat has severe consequences on multiple aspects of our daily life, including our health. So this map shows the number of heat health events in the region from 2011 and projected until 2030. The California Heat Assessment Tool defines a heat health event as any heat event that generates public health impacts regardless of absolute temperature. And according to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, extreme heat is the leading cause of weather-related death in the United States. In 2018, and for the annual average for the past 10 and 30 years, more people have died from heat than from rip currents, cold, lightning, tornadoes, hurricanes, or floods. So most of Yolo has between 1 to 3 of these heat health events, and Winters has about 3. But then by 2081 to 2099, this number has increased significantly, with most of the county having between 5 to 7, and Winters having about 7. 2081 might seem kind of far away to some people, but that's in just 62 years. And that's the future of our children and our grandchildren, and maybe some people in this room. So once we decided that heat was an issue we wanted to focus on, we realized that there are a few critical tools missing to successfully adapt. So we wanted to create this resiliency planning toolbox. So the toolbox is a document that contains template language that can be copied and pasted into jurisdictional plans and then modified to fit jurisdictional needs. And we wanted to create a tool that will allow jurisdictions to share resources and work together while still respecting the sovereignty of every jurisdiction. So tackling resilience requires a jurisdictional commitment to policy and action, but writing these policies and actions and other pieces of planning language is time intensive and resource intensive, and not every jurisdiction has the capacity to take on this additional work. But the toolbox offers this language for free and it's easily accessible, which makes the overall planning process much faster and available at a lower cost. And there are multiple goals of the toolbox, including to adapt and prepare for climate change. And we also want to support agencies in Senate Bill 379 compliance. So SB 379 passed in 2015, and it mandates that all cities and counties must incorporate climate adaptation and resiliency into the safety elements of their general plans by January 1st, 2022. And updating general plans is another very resource-intensive process that we're hoping the toolbox can help with, while also helping jurisdictions comply with state law. So this timeline shows overall YRC efforts so far. Toolbox creation happened between October 2018 and it's happening right now too, in August 2019. So over the course of these 10 or so months, I've been reading YOLO climate action plans and all the YOLO general plans, and also state adaptation guidance and the climate action and resiliency plans of other jurisdictions. And then I read what they did on heat and used that information to write the toolbox while getting feedback and review from members of the YRC. We are currently in our outreach and feedback phase where I'm presenting at councils like this. And I've been collecting feedback that I've been incorporating into additional revisions of the toolbox. So we want to make sure we're creating a living open source tool that can be valued and maintained by communities in YOLO, the Central Valley, across California, and other places that are impacted by extreme heat. So we will continue to review and update the toolbox as necessary. And there'll be a Civic Spark Fellow after me whose focus will be on communication and outreach to make sure that the toolbox is useful and used by jurisdictions and its existence is known. And also on this timeline is that deadline for SB 379. So we're hoping that this is going to prove very useful for jurisdictions as they will still have some time to implement the recommendations, but still with enough flexibility to modify it as they see fit. So what is in the toolbox? First, there's a brief introduction that explains the purpose of the toolbox and how to use it, and listing some resources, and also explaining how equity was integrated into the toolbox as a whole. And then the next two sections, planning language and single policies and actions, contain template boilerplate language that can be copied, pasted, and modified. And then implementation section includes resources for implementation and advice on key factors of implementation. And the toolbox also contains a brief conclusion to help summarize the importance of equity in resiliency work. So now we'll look at some sample content for the toolbox, starting with planning language. So this example explains that legal reason for adaptation in California. And then there's also template language explaining some of the more moral or ethical reasons you might want to consider adaptation in your plans. And now I'll take a closer look at the policies and action section. So to further streamline the planning process from the toolbox to general plans or jurisdictional plans, we have organized topics. We've organized all these recommendations by topics that are relevant to general plans and jurisdictional operations, such as agriculture, infrastructure, housing, public health. Not yet. Moving everything away again. There we go. So this example details a transportation recommendation that advises jurisdictions to consider shading transit routes. And this policy is generally paired with an action, and every action lists a projected timeline and a general estimated budget cost. And now talk a little bit about implementation. So a challenge we had in writing this implementation section is that we know that different jurisdictions face different challenges and realities in project implementation. So we took a more high-level view of implementation recommendations and focused on helping jurisdictions consider the full implementation process. That starts off with some high-level questions that have been recommended to think about during implementation. And then there are some implementation specifics that require more knowledge of local actors and local challenges. And then after answering all these questions, jurisdictions can use a fill-in-the-blank style checklist/table to help make sure that they've considered all these necessary implementation factors, including the specific SB 379 regulations. And we're hoping that this checklist/table helps jurisdictions stay organized and have a specific guide to reference during implementation. So, thank you. That concludes my presentation, and I'd like to thank all our member agencies and partners, and I'll be with you time.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I have a question about that. First, I wanted to thank you. I got to hear you at the housing. Yeah. What, can you give some examples of equity measures?
And implementation specifically?
Yeah.
So there's generally it's thinking about like before you embark on implementation, making sure you're thinking about who's going to be impacted by this policy and steps you can take to make sure that people who may not get all the benefit of a policy are still considered in your project implementation. It's like, okay, if this is going to negatively impact this group, what are some ways we can make sure that that negative impact is mitigated or lessened? So just generally advising people to think about implementation from a very holistic view.
One of your, I have a question, or you can clarify for me in the implementation part, you have a bullet point there on financing. So that would be a big question. How do we finance?
There are a lot of grant opportunities, and the state I know is there's definitely like some work going on at that level of like, yeah, this is a pretty ambitious thing that has been asked via SB 379. So here, like, there's a lot of grant opportunities, which is sort of unfortunate that it's like primarily through grants. But in the research I did, that was most of what I found. And then in the toolbox, there's like lists of, if you subscribe to this type of newsletter, they usually send out regular updates on new grant opportunities. Or you can check this kind of website and they have new opportunities listed there frequently.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so I want to make sure I understood, first, I just want to thank you, I think this is so important. The SB 379 is saying cities, even small cities like ours, has to have a climate action plan by 2022. In our general plan?
It doesn't say you need a climate action plan. It says that climate adaptation and resiliency need to be considered in the safety element of your general plan. So basically that means like thinking about how could our jurisdiction be impacted by climate change. and then accounting for that in the safety element of your general plan. Or if you have a local hazard mitigation plan that has addressed climate adaptation and resiliency, you can mention that in your general plan and say, use that same type of language.
So if we updated that element, we could insert it in that element.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just following up on that now, you know, have you looked at the Yolo County multi-hazard plan? Is they included in that?
From my understanding, the multi-hazard plan is more disaster and response focused instead of specific resiliency of more proactive action. People who work on it might have a differing opinion, but like when I was reading it, I understood it to be more response focused as opposed to readying focused.
Now, you're going to finish up your time. Is that something that you could leave as a note to the next person? Because when it comes to our overall emergency planning on things, we are really good at that. The multi-hazard plan for Yolo County is exceptional. And including those types of things because, if you could just leave that as a note, because that would be a very good area. Last year, when we had the YOLO climate resiliency workshop or whatever it was, the vast majority of the room were police chiefs, fire chiefs, city managers, and emergency managers. And that would be really good because those folks have a lot of clout.
I definitely see the need for all the emergency, part of that, but I was just wondering, so who would be the public health and safety or the planning and utilities and infrastructure? How do you include that? Or what does it look like to include that?
So I'll just do an example of infrastructure, thinking about like climate resilient infrastructure of like, if it's gonna get significantly hotter here, what building materials do we need to think about that might be different, or if we're at like increased risk for flooding, then similarly considering what building materials we need to think about. So resiliency is sort of arguing that like, you think about that as early as you can, instead of after this disaster happens and being like, okay, let's do something different next time. It's like, no, let's just do it now.
Right?
And similarly, like with housing and building, you can like build your buildings to be more climate resilient, whether that's like what side of your windows facing, what, a cool roof, how much energy are you gonna need to keep this building cool, and then in the event of if energy goes out, how hot is it gonna be in your building? If you think about climate considerations early on, it might be much more manageable.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Is there any public comment or questions that we could do or no?
Absolutely, you have some questions? We would welcome you to the microphone.
You know who I am. This is a very interesting topic, Sarah. Thank you very much for bringing it to our attention. I would like to know if we eliminate 800 acres of almond trees, wouldn't that impact our climate change here in Winters? There's a proposal for the North Winters with, it's 800 acres, is it not? Or
There's
how many
no
acres?
proposal.
Currently no proposal before us.
It's talk, but you know, talk sometimes come into situations. But I was just wondering, I like to be proactive if this would really impact this was climate change. I'm just a novice on this.
Well, certainly trees are cooler than asphalt, and and cement, but part of your development in residential areas could include planting more trees. And in the existing neighborhoods, we could encourage more people to plant more trees, because certainly trees are gonna help a lot with the cooling effect. I'm not sure what the numbers would be in terms of greenhouse gases and how the trees in the orchards are helping so much as, I mean, they use a lot of water, so there's that trade-off. But certainly adding more hardscape is gonna heat things up more than an orchard would. But there's, you know, you can certainly do a good job trying to mitigate that by planting more trees and just designing cool roofs and making the neighborhoods more adaptable that way.
Thank you.
Any questions? A hand in the back?
Hi, my name is Teresa Evans, and I'm considering being a resident in New Richard. I would like to know how building more buildings and using more electricity would impact the environment.
Well, again, I would say that you're gonna have more of an impact on the electrical grid, and so it is gonna impact you. But, on the other hand, we have to do our fair share of housing, so there's all these different kind of factors that kind of have to kind of be coordinated, and so I'm not sure that the orchards north of town is doing a lot for cooling our neighborhoods in town, but certainly if you add more pavement and more housing out there, that's gonna be hotter than it is now when you have trees out there.
And if you're using more electricity, it creates heat.
Yeah, definitely. So,
I think that would have a big impact.
well, hopefully, I mean, the green code is gonna be definitely pushing more solar and more efficiency, and so, you know, certainly the houses that we're building now are much more efficient than the houses we were building, 20, 30 years ago, in terms of using less energy.
Kate, did I see your hand in the back there as well?
You know me well. It's climate, I can't control it. Thank you, Mayor. Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And first of all, thank you so much to Sarah for her presentation on this and work on the toolbox, and to Carol Sienna for representing the city of the climate resiliency group. And in terms of urban heat island issues, well, I'll back up. Actually, the disaster preparedness subcommittee is looking, one of the disasters that we're looking at is heat, and specifically heat when the power goes out, whether it's because there's a fire or because of public safety power shut off. And so what building materials can there be in place that make it safe and shelter in place safer longer if you don't have the power? And so, so one of the questions that I have about the toolkit is, does it get into the details of being able to plug in what different building types are as you're considering different projects, whether it's residential or for business? I'm curious, and can probably talk with Sarah more later about how exactly the toolkit works and how we can use it. I think it's fantastic that it will be here and that we can use it. In terms of urban heat island, one of the things that I think that we can do to protect ourselves, and this would be another question about whether or not can plug into the toolboxes, is how can we look at decreasing the urban heat island effects in town, whether it's new portions of town or town that is currently here, and whether it is using lighter material or more reflective material for roads, for houses, as well as trees to cover it. In terms of kind of tying back in with what Carol was saying and what Tina brought up is urban heat island. So it's, you have infrared light that comes in, it gets, ultraviolet that comes in, it gets converted, some of it to infrared, and you get heating. And so this happens especially when you have something like flat pavement, and you get less of an urban heat island effect when you have highly reflective surfaces. So is it this sort of thing where the toolbox allows us to plug in, or is that do we have an opportunity to look at that sort of thing in another form? And the third thing, given my earlier enthusiasm about commissions, I just figure I'll touch base about the possible climate commission that Winters will have. that was brought up at the April 16th meeting when Carol Sienna gave an update about the climate action plan. And I was just hoping for an update on when that might happen, or what state it's in. I'm not sure if that's something that will start happening once Winters has our very own Civic Spark fellow working on climate, or if something's already in progress. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions, comments? I know one of the things that impacts it a lot is the vehicle miles traveled. So whatever we can do to reduce those by bringing more jobs to Winters so that the local people can, live here, work here, not have to drive so much, not have that impact on our environment. So that is one of the things we're working on. Trying to see what we can do to bring more jobs to town. Really important. Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. You're good.
Did you want her to address any of Kate's comments or?
Yeah, if you would like to, absolutely.
Sure, I can.
All right.
So, is this gonna work?
Yeah, you
Okay,
better.
it'll lift it up.
Bring it up. There you go.
Okay.
I'll hear you if you're back here. You can.
Okay, well, hello. So in terms of stuff that the toolbox covers, because we want it to be like a tool that can be used beyond YOLO, there's not as much like specific recommendation for like, here's what you should do in this one city, because like that could change very dramatically between areas. And it's mostly a tool for helping the actual planning process, and that like, it's sort of like, here's a list of a bunch of ideas you can consider, including ideas you can have for reducing the urban heat island impact in your community. But it's more like, here's a list of ideas, and then whatever you think is going to be appropriate for you, you can copy and paste that and just put it in your plan and think about it later. And then here's general advice on how you can make it happen. But it is not as much about like specific, like step-by-step details of what to do. But we are thinking about what to add to our appendix, and if there's resources for stuff about like recommendations for general building type information of like this kind of material is good, we'll put that more in the appendix. But that is something that could be potentially added and is not in the toolbox right now. But that's like a potential area of additional revision that could be helpful.
Maybe just a couple of other points. First of all, we've adopted the California Green Code, which is probably the most progressive building code in the world as far as how things go. All the development agreements that we've had all exceed Title 24 by 25% as far as things go. So in our overall building footprint, as far as going towards zero net energy on how the homes are produced and eventually, I can tell you that our building department received how many things for solar roofs today?
11.
11 solar roofs going in to the Aspire project, which is a small lot 2-story project. And when it comes to our effects on climate change, 8 out of 10 points of our impact in Winters on the environment negatively have to do with vehicle miles traveled. And that gets to the idea of creating local jobs. Winters' impact on the environment has less to do with development and the way that we're doing that, and it has more to do with the amount of vehicle miles traveled and people using their car. That's what we know about the Winters climate. We know that 7 out of 10 people who work in Winters come to town every single morning, and they're traveling between a minimum of 15 to probably 25 miles in each direction. So anyway, those are some of the big points.
All right, we're going to move on to our discussion item number 1, which is a public hearing and consideration of proposed amendments to Chapter 17.12, Fine Agency, Out of chapter 17.54, vacation rentals, title 17. City Planner David Oswell.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So as you mentioned, the item before you tonight involves 2 amendments to the code to provide for regulating vacation rentals in the city of Winters. Currently, we don't regulate those types of uses. And this process began with an internship a year ago in July. One of the tasks the intern was given was to look into other city vacation rental ordinances and come up with some proposals as to what the city could possibly incorporate in an ordinance were we to draft one, and also some of the key issues that this person was able to identify in researching the subject matter. Planning Commission has held 7 meetings, including the final meeting on June 25th of this year. There are a number of key points that are on the slide that you see. The ones in black are ones that were already in existence that were discussed in various iterations of the ordinance. And then the red ones are the ones that were added by the Planning Commission as recommended changes to the final draft that is forwarded on to the City Council and attached to your staff report. We met on 3 different occasions with citizens who were affected directly by this ordinance. Sandy Vickery met with me on 3 different occasions. Abigail Vargas and Benny Dipple met with me on 1 occasion each. They both attended, or all attended, some or all of the Planning Commission hearings. In the drafting of the ordinance, we started with the Napa ordinance and also looked at the Sacramento ordinance. They were sort of our base templates. If you were to look at the Napa ordinance compared to what ultimately got recommended for approval, you can see that we pared it down considerably. We've geared it more towards what would be appropriate for Winters. Meeting the staff and the Planning Commission, working together with the people that we met with. One of the things that we talked about and that ultimately the Planning Commission supported was limiting hosted or non-hosted, and there's a distinction there. Hosted means you live somewhere on the property, you're renting out rooms. Non-hosted is you live off the property and you have either yourself or an agent managing it. To 10 persons in the household, they could stay there at any given time. There was an exception made to that, which is actually on the next slide, that the Planning Commission, looking at non-hosted, which require a conditional use permit, or proposed to require a conditional use permit, could increase that number beyond 10. We also looked at the applicability of this ordinance. When would it be applied? It would be applied if you were going to do it more than 1 time a year. So first time, if you decided to rent your house as a vacation rental, you would be obligated to comply with the ordinance. Hosted facilities are going to be looked at as a sort of an administrative approval process and at the zoning administrator level, which is a step below the Planning Commission. It would be a simpler process in that there would be noticing the property owners within 100 feet. We don't have an established fee. We would have to work with a fee consultant that updated our fees recently and come up with a fee. And looking at other cities, their fee for the administrative permit was somewhere in the $300 to $400 range. It would be a one-time fee both for that and the use permit. As long as you continue to operate at that location, you would only have to renew your business license on an annual basis. We talked about inspections. Initially, when you applied, the property would be inspected by building, myself or someone in the community development and the fire department. You'd be looking for code compliance at the time, assuming that the structure was code compliant and you went through the entitlement process and got approved for the use. There would be no need for further inspections unless we received a complaint. So that was one of the other things that we talked about. Should they be subject to annual review? And the Planning Commission felt not necessarily. But it said if we have a complaint, let's say someone's staying in a facility, we're bringing it to our attention that they observed what they thought was a code violation. We might then have the building department or fire department both go out and re-inspect the property. And there would be a fee, an inspection fee. It's a minimal amount, I believe it's somewhere in the $90 range. But otherwise, it would be at the outset and then no additional inspections. Planning Commission talked about parking. So we originally talked about you need to have a parking space for every 2 people, and it was discussed, well, that doesn't make sense if 4 people come into a vehicle. Why do you need to have, parking based on people? So we went by vehicles. So if you come to a vacation rental and there's 1 car, you need to have 1 additional off-street parking space or the ability to accommodate that. That could often be done in the driveway, even if you were a hosted facility. One of the things the Planning Commission did change is allowing you to use the parking space in front of your house as one of the required spaces. Noise regulations, we had some language in there sort of differentiating between hot tubs and pools and just the general noise that you can emit from a single-family residence. In the end, we just went with what we have on the books, which talks about the hours of quiet, which are between 10 and 7 in the morning. So that's one of the changes the Planning Commission. Authorized agent or the owner, originally it had, I think you had to be available within an hour. Well, as Benny said behind me, getting here in an hour, sometimes from where he might be, is nearly impossible. But a day usually would give the staff an opportunity to then meet with the property owner and say, look, we've got this issue. We need to meet at the site and see how we can resolve it. She'll be proud of me if I do this right. I might not either. Went the wrong way. Oh, no, I didn't. Here we go. So I talked about the 100 feet. Need to raise the fee. This is come up with a fee rather for non-hosted fire inspections, business license. As I said, the community development, the conditional use permit fee is already established. It's $1,820. Why is it so? Well, it's a public hearing. It's a much larger noticing process, much more time involved, and of course the Planning Commission gets involved. And by the way, both the zoning administrator and the Planning Commission decisions are appealable to the City Council. And then, as I mentioned to you, increasing the number of guests above 10 would be done on a non-hosted facility at the Planning Commission's discretion. They could theoretically raise that number. Interestingly, we won't mention names, but the only facility that I'm aware of that could accommodate those kind of numbers is actually a hosted facility. So it may never come to pass, but one of the concessions the Planning Commission suggested was that. One that I overlooked, which I don't know how I did because Abby's here and Abby was the one who brought it up, is there's a restriction about the use of accessory dwelling units. The ordinance is drafted, says that you cannot use the accessory dwelling unit as your vacation rental.
Why?
Because the idea of accessory dwelling units was that they were to be affordable housing. And they were used, and they're used in our housing element as an example of how the city meets some of its affordability. The minute you use it as an accessory dwelling unit, it becomes non-affordable because it rents at a much higher rate than it would on a monthly basis if it was a rental. Our accessory dwelling unit ordinance currently does not prohibit you from using that. We will be updating our accessory dwelling unit ordinance because there's new state legislation coming down that will affect it. Assuming the council were to keep that wording in here, then our accessory dwelling unit ordinance would be mirrored after the same restriction that it cannot be used for that purpose. I think
There's no law to that effect now.
there is no law. I don't know that there'll be legislation coming down that would do that. I talked to a person who I know fairly high up in the HCD, Housing and Community Development, and he said some cities have it in their ordinance, some cities don't. It's really at this point, it's up to the individual city as to whether or not that restriction is in their code. I'm not aware of any state legislation coming down that will mandate that cannot be used for that purpose. But again, that was one of the issues.
So the subvention over local control regarding the accessory dwelling units came down from the state, and the focus was 100% on affordable and workforce housing. And that's the reason why they came in and said, you have to allow these things. They view it from both the affordable and the workforce housing side of things. Dave points out that in achieving affordability, whether it's in your housing element, our accessory dwelling unit portion of the municipal code directly points right at the idea of affordable housing. So depending on where legislation goes, they may bring it somewhere to the effect that they would say, if you allow it, you can't, if you allow accessory dwelling units to be used for Airbnb, then you might not be able to count it towards your affordability side on things. So
Have we looked into how other jurisdictions are addressing ADUs with Airbnb?
I can't tell you off the top of my head what city it is. There was one city I found that actually did address it in their ADU. That was, I think, Napa, which was our template that we used. Sacramento didn't have anything in their ordinance, and I can't remember the other ones, what their restriction is, if there is any. I know Napa does specifically state that, because that's where it originated.
I don't think Napa's a good comparison
No.
for us. I've got another question though about this hosted. and
Let me make
non-
one correction. The city attorney pointed out, the planning commission can approve increasing the maximum number of guests. That actually should be under non-hosted, not hosted. That's in the wrong spot.
Okay,
But go
the
ahead.
non-hosted means the owner doesn't live on the property
Correct,
while it's being rented.
correct.
And the hosted means they do,
Somewhere on the property.
somewhere on the
Right,
property.
for example, in Abigail's situation, she actually could be in the ADU and rent out her house, interestingly, but not the other way around.
Yeah, it just
I
seems,
think the titles might be flipped.
yeah, okay, this, in Abigail's right. Okay, in this, where it says hosted, that should say non-hosted.
yeah,
And where it
because
says
why would we
non-hosted.
need the planning
Yeah,
commission
no, no, it's
approval
backwards.
and all
It's
the extra
backwards. Okay.
fee if the
Yep,
people
no.
live there?
Yep, no, it's backwards, it's backwards.
Okay,
Everything that's listed under non-hosted should be under hosted and,
okay.
yep,
I
that's.
thought that was backwards.
No, it's backwards, because the hosted is considered to be less of an impact theoretically.
Right.
Permitting process is less. The non-hosted, you have a chance of more impact on your neighborhood. And so the reason for the conditional use permit is because the planning commission should be making that call. So so let's just change those two words and we'd be fine, as far as the other ones that are listed underneath.
It's just, the slide's incorrect, the ordinance is correct.
Yeah, the ordinance is correct. The PowerPoint generator operator. that person.
We won't mention any names, right?
No, he's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I have a question also.
Spell check it.
If we have and they're not being used for, housing.
Right.
They're just sitting there vacant.
Right.
Does the state, can we count them anyway?
Well, we count them. So each year when Dan does the housing element update, we acknowledge any new ADUs that have been built in the last cycle. And so that counts towards meeting some of our RENA numbers, because there's a presumption by size that's affordable. And so it probably fits in the low category, not the very low or extremely low. And so it helps us in meeting our number. But do we know that they're actually being rented? No, we have no way of knowing that. That's between obviously the property owner of the IDU.
And you also have no way of knowing what they're being rented for.
We don't. We absolutely don't.
So I don't see where the difference is at, whether it's Airbnb or somebody just charging by the month.
And that's a council prerogative, I wouldn't argue with him. Therefore, Tim, that's a decision that you can ultimately make. Unless the state comes down with something that says otherwise, right now you can allow ADUs to be used for Airbnb or vacation rentals if that's your choice.
I'd like to see if we could find other cities that are more comparable to Winters and how they might have addressed that, or if they did.
We looked at others, I don't have them committed to memory, so I don't wanna just go off the top of my head. We looked at Grass Valley, Abigail had a long list of ones that she had looked at, that she felt were more compatible or comparable to Winters. You know, it's a tough one because there aren't a lot of small cities that have people wanting to stay, no offense to some of those small cities there, that, you know,
They're not as special as us.
that's a nice way of putting it for us, not for them. So, you know, the Galts, the Ceres, you know, those kind of places that are farming communities, you know, they don't really have a lot of people staying in the city that are staying in a vacation rental.
I'll give a city that's just west of us, over the hill, Youngville. And Youngville has ADUs, and they allow Airbnbs in the ADUs. And as a result, it's completely decimated their workforce housing.
So then does the state step in and
No, they don't, it's completely the prerogative of the council. You won't, if you say, yep, ADUs for Airbnbs are fine, you can say that.
And I mean, they're, obviously not everyone's gonna choose to go that route.
Yeah.
But if they do go that route, they do get the TOT tax.
We would get the TOT tax, oh, absolutely, yeah, no, she has to pay that, and she understands that part of it. Um, Different than obviously if you're renting it out as a affordable housing, you aren't paying TOT.
Is there any direction or disclosure in the title process when you buy a house that would tell you that you can't use it?
Yes. No. The only thing we have, and I've got to work with the county on this, but is that we require that the owner live in one of the two units on ADUs that have been approved in the last 2 years. Prior to that, it was the owner had to be the applicant for an ADU. But 2 years ago, when we updated our ordinance to meet some of the new state laws, we added the restriction that the owner's supposed to live in one of the 2 units. And that's common, not every city has it, but that's common, to try to distinguish property with an ADU from a duplex, where the owner doesn't have to live on the property at all.
So we have properties that have ADUs that have different rules.
Different rules, because the original legislation was in 1985, and then originally they were called grand units, or mother-in-law units. That terminology died probably 15 years ago. And all the restrictions and age restrictions and who you rented to, those have all been taken away. The ability for the city to regulate those have been taken away by the state, because many communities fought having them and wouldn't allow them for various reasons. So the state said, well, we need affordable housing. We're going to legislate it away so you can't do that. So in the end, conclusion, with the one gross error made there, but if you see those things, they're actually exactly how they're listed in the code. That before you tonight, the planning commission on a 5-to-1 basis, with one commissioner dissenting, and he dissented on the ADU issue, because he didn't agree, or he wasn't convinced that there was evidence that supported why ADU should be excluded from being used for vacation rentals. And then Commissioner Adams had to recuse himself to recommend approval of this ordinance to the council. I've answered any questions, but I'll answer more. And I said Abby's here, Annie's here, and I didn't see Sandy's behind me, but it wouldn't surprise me if she was.
So one of the questions that has come up is, when we talked about Airbnb, which is one of the biggest.
It's the 800-pound gorilla if there ever was.
There's a lot of other companies that also do the same thing. You know, we worked out some type of agreement with Airbnb to collect the TOT, but without all the other.
So I know Shelley's working with Diana downstairs, and they're compiling a list of other sites that have vacation rentals listed on them. And I don't know if we've begun the process of contacting those property owners and advising them of the fact that they do need to pay TOT. But I know we're going to if we haven't. And none of those other companies I'm aware of do the same thing as Airbnb, which is to collect on the city's behalf.
Yes.
Would you like me to comment?
Yes, I would love to.
So Airbnb, you know, since they're the largest company that provides that, they, you know, kind of the innovator in that whole area of the industry. Early on, I think they had some conflicts with some of the larger cities, San Francisco and others, related to the collection of TOT. And my understanding, a bit of the history of it, is that initially they were kind of resistant to it, and then they came to the point where they realized it was more efficient, probably more neighborly to the cities to enter into an agreement to provide for just the collection themselves. And so our firm had actually, so they began entering into agreements with cities where they agreed that they would collect the TOT directly from the person who was renting it, or, you know, renting the unit, because the way TOT works is it's not the business owner is required to collect it, but it's a tax on the person who's staying in the unit, as we all know. And we pay that whenever we stay in a hotel. So Airbnb entered into these agreements with cities, and we had negotiated several with them, and we had a contact at Airbnb who we've done these agreements with before, so we just did one on behalf of Winners as well. To my knowledge, none of the other ones have kind of are at that level where they're entering into those agreements currently. So, you know, we traditionally just reached out to the owner of the unit on that issue. You know, we're as a firm, we're monitoring it. So if other VRBO and others start doing that, you know, we'll certainly do that on behalf of Winners too. But to my knowledge, thus far they haven't been doing that.
Just a little aside on this. We live in a data-driven world, and one of the things that we're finding is that there are actually services out there that are tracking multiple types of these services. So for folks who think, well, gee, if I'm not on Airbnb, but I'm on VRBO or all those, if they think the city just has to chase them. We have started getting inquiries. Obviously, this shows up out in the world that we're considering this type of stuff. But there are other these agencies which will tell us when the units are being rented. They can even tell us how much they're being rented for. It's like a wonderful service, and if we have to pay a little bit to subscribe, I think we're going to subscribe. But anyway.
Yeah, I looked tonight, and the big one in town is $1,210 a night if all 16 guests are attending the facility. And there's one actually outside of town, just outside of town, it's $1,600 a night, and it can accommodate up to 30 people. So it's pretty lucrative, to say the least, compared to what you can rent your property on a monthly basis.
But those are exceptions.
They are the exceptions. The norm is somewhere between probably 150 and 250 on the ones that are listed on Airbnb's site right now.
I thought it was more like $40 to $65 here.
There's some rooms as low as 65, but not the whole house.
Yes.
I'm not sure where I stand on this, to be honest with you. And one part of the question is there a rush to take care of this tonight?
There is not, because we've missed the summer season. So,
Okay, the second question is, can we find out other cities like Winter, size of Winters are doing? Can we find out if we would run into trouble with the state? Can we get any more information on that before we make a decision on whether we should allow AUDs as Airbnbs?
I can surely find out, because virtually every city has an ADU ordinance on the books. And so I can find out if their actual ordinance says anything about the use of an ADU.
Mm-hmm.
And then contrarily, if I can find vacation rental ordinances for some of those same cities, my my guess is they'll either have or not have language as to how that ADU can be used. It's doable. I've got some of them. I just didn't include them. You know, at some point in the process, we sort of got to the point where, okay, if we just keep researching, we're never gonna get to a decision. And so, but there are both.
Are we currently getting TOT from Airbnb?
Yes,
We are.
yes.
So it's not like if we.
No, as I said, the planning commission realized during the process that by the time this were to take effect, it would be mid-September. And so we guesstimated we missed sort of the peak season as a result of, but these were all, you know, good things to do, which is to continue to look at it, continue to refine it, continue to make it a better ordinance. And I would arguably say that from what we first presented to them and what is in front of you tonight, almost night and day.
Just to, I just wanted to clarify quick on the TOT issue. I mean, that's really a separate, we can collect, on all of these, we can collect TOT now. So this is essentially a regulatory ordinance where we would, you know.
So this has nothing to do with collective.
This has nothing to do with TOT.
We already pursue that, we already do that.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question on the ADUs in winter. So do you have an idea through your research with Airbnb, how many ADUs in winters are currently being used?
Again,
Is it zero?
well, no, I wouldn't say zero. We were looking at one tonight, and I rely on some people that know the city a lot better than I do.
I know it's
Born and raised, and it appeared there's at least one that is on their website right now. And that's the only one that we could say with some certainty that wasn't part of a house.
And how many ADUs might we have in winters?
Well, while I've been here 4+ years, I'd say we've approved about 10. I'm guessing
So it's a
there's
really small
probably
number.
20 or 30 total in the whole community. More? Okay, so just in my 4 years, it's at least 10 that I've been involved with directly, so. And that's since 2015.
And so you said earlier that what was built as a granny flat is no longer called a granny flat?
Right, they're all called accessory dwelling units, but at the time the granny flat was built, none of these regulations existed. Or virtually none, except for most cities required conditional use permits, surprisingly. So they're grandfathered in. They're grandfathered in.
And there's nothing when you buy the house that says you have a restriction on your use.
Correct. There's nothing.
Well,
And I'm not aware of any city that has that kind of restriction.
We may want to check that. Because within the conditions of approval on some developments, I know of at least one that we should probably go back and look at.
Would it be something to consider, maybe having language that if your accessory dwelling unit was built after 2016, that there would be a restriction on it?
Could.
But if it was built before that,
Many ordinances have that built into the ordinance that they say, here's the rule that was prior to this ordinance. From this day forward, this is the rule. Everything that preceded that is treated differently. Actually, Napa had a 2-tiered system. They have the original vacation rental ordinance, and then they have their current one, and it references the prior one versus the current one, and has similar grandfathering language in it. Good.
thank you, Dick.
As a public hearing.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you're done with.
No, I'm not. I
presentation.
mean, I can always answer these.
So I do want to open it up for the public hearing so that we can, you know, there's a couple people here that have submitted papers. And we can have more discussion on it after the public hearing. So at 7:48, I will open up the public hearing for comments. I have 2 sheets here, I believe, that were submitted. The first one is Abigail Vargas.
Hello, my name is Abigail Vargas. I live at 1012 Taft Court. A quick history or background for me is we moved here a year ago, bought a corner unit in town that has an ADU unit. And we remodeled it and are listing it part-time on Airbnb. The other time, we're using it for our elderly parents to stay with us. We don't have a downstairs bedroom or bathroom for them. They can't use stairs. So when they come to stay with us, they're able to stay there and visit with us. And we do expect, and one of the reasons we bought the property with the ADU unit is that within the next 5 years, that one of them will probably end up coming to live with us. So that was our biggest reason for purchasing it. I do have a lot of comments. I'll try to be brief. I do want to address, I did do a lot of research on the different ordinances throughout California state with the cities, and there seems to be a big range of them. And it was very difficult to find ordinances for a town of our size. And it seemed to be, the ordinance was very relaxed and it was really set up to collect the tax, or it was extremely restrictive in an attempt to keep the citizens of the town from setting up a Airbnb. Basically, it was to try to keep them from setting it up because they didn't want them to. I feel, so I did help Dave with the final drafts of the ordinance, and however, I still agree with most of it. I feel it is very restrictive still. And it's not so much for me about the fee, it's more the principle in that, you know, most of the cities that I reviewed who were open to the Airbnb model did not have inspections that were done by the planning commission or with the commission. Most of them, it was registering and you had certain rules that you were supposed to post in your unit, and if you didn't comply to them, then, you know, the city had the right to come and talk to you about it. So I'm hoping that if we do an ordinance, which I'd rather we didn't, that we do consider maybe a less restrictive one. And I do apologize, I'm recovering from some illness. I think that's about it. Can't remember the rest of it, so, thank you, but I don't know if there's any questions.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
When you say, but you think it should be less restrictive,
Mhm.
could you just maybe quantify what, or qualify that in some, like how, you mean like the whole body of the whole document should be
I
less
think
restrictive?
more, so I do consider myself a hosted, type dwelling, even though the person's not staying directly inside my house. So for me, having to have to do an inspection and go through a mailing of everybody 100 feet, I just don't feel that there's any benefit gained from doing that. Because when you're hosted, there's usually very little issues that arise during those situations. So I don't know if there's really anything gained by having all of those restrictions put on us that we have to follow. And on the flip side too, you have to consider when you add rules, people like to break them. And as soon as you add a rule, someone says, well, I don't want to do the ordinance, so I'm going to skirt around it. And then you actually end up creating dangerous situations, I believe. So sometimes adding a rule can also increase the risk for people. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I also have one submitted by Benny DePoy.
Hi. I have a lot to say on the topic, but I think I really want to focus on some of the comments that were brought up in the questions. The first one being the timing related to getting this done, and the comment about the summer season is almost over. And I think it goes to speak to this notion based on, narratives that were put together about what a lot of these Airbnbs or short-term rentals are. And I think when it was originally talked about that we needed an ordinance, it was that, it's during the summer, people come up here to party for the weekend. And I can only speak to my experience, but that's really not the case. When I'm not there, I run it out throughout the year, and there's people coming for weddings on the weekends. There's a lot of people with businesses. We talked about adding solar and how that's good for the environment. I've had several groups that stayed there that were, installing solar here around the area. There's people working at the casino that stayed here for an extended period of time. If winters wasn't available and it became restrictive enough that there weren't the opportunities, the people are going to go elsewhere. So, and then during the winter season, there's a lot of people that come for the holidays, and it's local winters residents that are renting it for their family that are coming in. So to say that it's disruptive or a burden on the community, it's hard for me to believe that when it's local residents renting it. And at the end of the day, you can paint this story, but when the facts were presented, they mentioned 4 police calls to short-term rentals. One of them was my house, and so I called the police department and I asked, and they said it was a noise violation. And I said, do you have any more information? And they said, no. They said, all that we have is that an officer reported they're in the area. And I said, well, there's nothing else. And they said, well, that usually means that they were in the area, they didn't hear anything, so they didn't talk to anyone or engage. So that, to me, is hard to count as a disturbance if the police officer didn't engage at the house. And I believe the other 3 that were mentioned weren't actually at the address of a short-term rental. I believe the quote was something along the lines of a possible corrected address. So I'm not sure what that means, but it doesn't seem like the issue was a short-term rental. So if there's no facts that support that there's an issue from a rowdiness standpoint, then I think we throw out that argument. The second big one that I've heard is taxes. And as we talked about, there's an agreement with Airbnb. The majority of the houses in Winters are through Airbnb. And I would think, as Ethan mentioned, that the other properties are still able to enforce the TOT. I would think with efficiency, any enforcement effort would be offset by the increased TOT revenue. And so when we think about the biggest deterrent is the fees, and so it's not determined what the hosted fee would be, and it's determined that it would be over $1,800 for the non-hosted. And I think that prohibits a lot of people from entering it. For me, whether this passes or not, I'm going to continue to welcome people into the city of Winters to showcase it, to benefit me, the people renting it, and the city, especially a lot of the local businesses that I've talked to and am looking to partner with, so that when people are there, they have, access to coupons, samples, to, promote them to go out and visit. And I think, my concern is that I understand the need to look at other ordinances, and I'm not a politician, but to me, the ordinance should be to solve a problem, right? And I haven't heard anything that says there's a problem that we need to solve. It seems to be, hey, we took Napa, which really, to me, is not comparable, and say, well, how do we change this and tear this down? And the other concern that I have, and Jesse brought up, grandfathering in for ADU specifically, but the concern is there is, language in there that said, we haven't restricted the number of days that it can be rented, but in the future that might change. And I think throughout the process, there was a lot of, comments that were, well, we can always revisit this if needed. My concern is, when I was buying the property, for me to stay in, for my family to stay in when they come from the East Coast, I made sure to do my research. I made sure, well, it has to be on a street that's not, owner occupied only. And my concern is if the guide keeps changing, then it's not really fair for people that are making maybe the biggest financial decision of their life And when they determine whether it's financially feasible, if the bar keeps changing, and so whether it's grandfathering in or just not having the ordinance, I think it's just dangerous to think that somebody makes a good financial decision to buy the house and then the rules change. And I think we think about, housing affordability a lot of times from if this person doesn't have a house, how can we get them into a house? If this ADU wasn't rented to somebody else, it could be rented to this person. But I think it's also important to think of affordable housing as, how does this person keep their house, right? And so if you don't have these large fees, it's very reasonable for somebody to say, okay, if I have another room, or if I'm going to be gone for part of the year, that I can rent it out. And with these one-time fees, the last thing somebody that's struggling to make their mortgage is going to do is pay $1,800. So a couple of the other benefits that I see and that I have experienced directly is, with natural disasters. So I've hosted people last year during the campfire. They reached out to me within 24 hours of it occurring, and they said, hey, we just lost our house, and we don't have anywhere to stay. Obviously, this isn't going to be a long-term solution, but in the short term, can we stay there? And I said, absolutely. And we made it work. And without being on this Airbnb platform, they wouldn't have been able to access me. And so it's not about, oh, how many times are you renting it? It's, hey, this option is here, right? And without that, you're not going to contact those people. There's no question that with this one-time fee, people aren't going to put it up and say, hey, is this going to work? Or maybe down the road I could rent it. Until I can prove it, then I'm not going to do it. And so I have the advantage that I have experience. And so I know some of those things, and it's going to be worth it for me. But I think that letting other people have the same opportunity would be great. I'm open to any questions.
Any questions?
Thanks.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing at 8:01 and open it up for more discussion from the council.
I run an Airbnb in another city. I have a situation very similar to Abby's. It's a vacation rental. My family is the owner, but my family can't spend every day there. So I Airbnb, and that pays the fees. It pays my taxes, so my family doesn't have to come up with taxes. It repairs, it's enough to make the money to repair the building as any older building needs repair. And then that makes it available to my family. So I really identify with Abby on her use. If her parents can come and stay and she can use it as a granny flag, even though that terminology might not be your preferred terminology, but yet have some income from it so that she can keep it very nice for them. I think that she should be allowed to do that. That is, to me, it should be her right. And I know that there's several people in Winters that have Airbnbs in their house because they're really not making it. They could lose their house. And it's a way that they make enough. And if the economy was a little bit better and they were, more employed, they might not have people in their home. But, and then the other comment I'd just like to make is that when I have relatives come into my house, come to visit, and it's more relatives than my house can possibly contain, I use the Airbnb right down the street from me, and I put up, different relatives, and I use the Abbey House. So I think that it's really useful in Winters. I like the structure of the Airbnb. I like the TOT is paid. I like that it's available, and I like that we have it. And I wrestle with some of this language here, but I see it as a large benefit to the community. Thank you.
I have a comment about the non-hosted vacation rental. In terms of the 10-person maximum guest. What does it take to overcome that?
Well,
In other words,
you would have to be able to demonstrate you could handle the parking in the larger facility, might be able to do that. If it was a non-hosted facility, you theoretically would be able to prove to the planning commission that I've got the bedrooms to support, because the housing code is basically 2 a bedroom. So let's say you have a house that's 8 bedrooms and you've got enough parking to park the cars off the street. The planning commission could conceivably raise that number. But it would be based on criteria that the commission would have to evaluate at the time that your use permit was before them. For the hosted facilities, the presumption was you were never going to get to that number, even though that same house could have people living in one of the rooms and renting out the other 5 or 6, let's say. There are a few houses in town, the property's large enough that they could accommodate more than 10 people, and could park the vehicles off the street or directly in front of the house. So that was sort of, I don't know, the concession to Commissioner Contreras. I think it was to some extent that at least the flexibility existed in the ordinance to allow for it. And I would just want to say one other thing. There are ordinances out there that don't require hosted facilities to go through an entitlement process. There are ordinances out there that do. And so we're the ones that obviously require both as it's proposed for the council.
well, the further question I have is, what's gonna happen when we have to come up with affordable housing and take it away from it?
Well, we still have no way of knowing, other than going on an Airbnb site or one of the others, if a ADU is being used for that purpose. And Abby's not hiding the fact that hers is, and so we know that's one of them. That's the one that's currently on their website.
But if we build it, we get the credit towards
We
the
get
unit
credit.
numbers as building that affordable
Well,
housing unit.
And John pointed out when we were talking about this, you get huge reductions on your fees when you build an ADU. You don't pay the same fees you would pay if you were building that second dwelling unit on that same lot. But because it's an
Because
ADU,
it's not justified to charge those fees.
well, no,
I
the
fought
state,
long and hard for that.
well, the state says that, wait, the state tells the city, you can't charge the same fees for an ADU as you charge for a single family
Because
residence.
you shouldn't.
Well, maybe so, but I'm saying, and the council, many councils ago adopted a resolution that lowered the fees for accepting every dwelling units before they became known as ADUs. So this council, no, but a previous council already determined at some prior date that we shouldn't be charging the same fees.
Yeah, I might want to follow up just a little bit. The planning commission, what we did, this went before the planning commission 7 times.
7 times.
And literally spent hours on this. And I'd maybe like to bring things back on the center. Obviously, Benny and Abigail did a very good job of representing their side. The basis of this ordinance is pretty simple. This is a business enterprise which is being allowed to occur within the residential zone for which it was not done. Did we have neighbors that came and brought examples that may not completely agree with some of the things? Yes, we did. In Winters, we have at least one Airbnb which hosts up to 30 people in it right now, regularly. As part of the new economy, the reason why we brought this was based on it's happening in the residential zone. It's different, and unquestionably, where the economy is going, it seems like millennials all like to sleep in other people's houses and beds. for some reason. One of the issues is obviously the coming and going. If you look at this for the hosted, all it requires is that the neighbors know that that's going on. Within a 100-foot radius, that's literally a couple houses down and a couple houses over, so that people will know. And in this case, the entitlement in the process is probably going to be $300 to $400, a one-time fee, and then they have to get a business license each year. And given the prices that we've seen that people are getting for their rooms, pretty good. Can they afford that? They probably can if they're going to go into it. But in the case of the hosted units, it's a nominal one-time fee for the neighbors and everybody to get to know about that. This is a transitory business. They're different people. I can tell you that if you decided that you wanted to run a hair salon or a massage place out of your business, number one, or out of your home, you couldn't do it unless you came in and went through the conditional use permit, which would cost $1,800. And it would have to be at 300, and we would have to do that level of notification for it. In this case, if somebody's hosting an Airbnb, they can have 7 different people come every day of the week on this. And finally, you know, if you just look at the root of all this, the difference between the hosted and the non-hosted just is the idea of the protection of the neighborhood. I know that Benny and Abigail and Sandy and everybody, they did a great job, and they met with Dave on a regular basis. But I can tell you that the Planning Commission is really, they went through this thing multiple times. When it comes to the ADUs and consideration of that, if Dave needs to do a little bit more research, I can tell you that from the staff perspective, not necessarily the hill that we're going to die on regarding the ADUs, but it's probably something that we should get if that's a hang up for anybody on the council, our ability to go out and do a little bit of research over the course of the next couple of weeks is very much there. But like I said, there's a very strong basis for this ordinance. It's not just the tax revenue, because we're going to get that anyway. It's just the idea of the business enterprise.
I've got more question for Dave, but if Abigail's got a comment, I can.
Just
go
one
ahead.
really quick, council
Come up to the
member,
microphone, please.
Oh,
Like,
sorry.
see on the camera and who's talking.
council member Lauren mentioned renting Abby's house. It was not mine. I believe it's the Airbnb, or the bed and breakfast across the street.
Right, Abbey House.
Yes, Abby House,
Correct.
not Abby's house. Yes.
Sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
Just wanted to clarify. We don't have anything going, so.
Okay, Dave,
Yes.
on this building and fire inspection, exactly what will the building department and fire department be looking for and inspecting for?
Well, again.
I think that needs to be very clear.
Yeah, and I'm not capable of answering necessarily what Gene would be looking for, but I'm gonna speculate. that you-
I've talked to
checking.
Gene about
Have you? Okay,
life safety.
that's what I understood.
Okay, so
Smoke
the only thing
detectors.
he's gonna be looking for is smoke detector, CO2 detector,
Right.
probably that there's a fire extinguisher.
Correct.
And
And egress.
egress out of the bedroom.
Correct.
Okay. Because a lot of these units, being older units, they're not gonna come up to 2016 code. Or they're not gonna have fire sprinklers, and they're not gonna
Yeah,
have.
none of that's gonna.
I think it
Running
needs to
water,
be,
right?
yeah.
It's life safety.
It needs to be very clear that we're not there to bring their house up to.
No,
It's a fire, life, safety.
it'll be life safety. It'll be the good old fashioned CO2, the smoke detector, and the ingress egress. And that where they're staying has the occupancy. And that will be probably both the combination of the planning review and the zoning. life safety and occupancy.
I mean, I would say 98% of the structures are gonna meet code, fire safety, and with minimal changes to the structure as far as adding those features that you've already talked about. The one that we have the most concern about at a staff level, and we have the right probably today to take a look at, is the one where we believe some of the places people are actually staying,
Yeah.
never
that's a whole
approved
different
for
story. No,
occupancy.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
And again, we're talking at the outset. So it's included with the fee, you're not gonna charge a second fee or a third fee. Your use permit fee will include a initial inspection by a fire and building for life safety. And then only as needed after that, you would never have a fund. And that was originally there, that you would have an annual fire inspection. And the discussion was, do we do annual fire inspections anywhere else in town? The answer is no. So why subject them to something we don't subject the rest of the community to?
Okay. That's all we do.
No, I think that I'm not comfortable, but I don't have any more. And most of my questions have been answered, and I've heard that we could find out more if we waited a couple of weeks. So I'd like to know more.
Yeah, the only thing and you can jump in, if you do decide to continue it, it's just continue it to a date certain, so we don't have to renotice it.
Right, so you would just specify that you're continuing
To August
the public
20th.
hearing to August 20th.
Yeah.
20th.
Yeah, I have a lot of that information in my folder at my desk, but I don't have it committed to memory, so I put it together for you in a supplemental staff report for the next meeting.
And the supplemental staff report will include information on ADUs.
Yes.
From.
Yeah,
large
I've written
cities.
myself a couple of notes.
And more information on what will exactly be inspected, and maybe like the cost for the hosted would actually, like,
Yeah,
the numbers.
I can only give you what other cities are charging for similar permits, and I will do that in the report. So Abby did a lot of that herself, and I have that same information now. And so I'm guessing, since pretty much the same process would occur in this city as occurs in those cities, it's probably comparable to what our fee would be. But we have to have.
Ultimately, we'll bring a ballpark, but in order for us to charge a fee, we actually have to go back and have our consultant kind of run it a little bit. It won't cost us that much, but we do, in order for us to establish the fee structure, we do have to have an independent person kind of look at it. So we'll bring back the ballpark.
But I'll
And where did the 1820 come from?
That's
an
already been established, yes, that's an
Yeah.
established use. Yeah, and that was done as part of the fee study.
Because you have to hold the planning
Right.
commission
The
hearing.
Yeah, it's just a much more complex process at a use permit level than it is state driven, not locally driven like ours would be for the hosted facilities. So I've got my notes.
So I have a few comments as well. Just waiting till last, but, so I think one of the main things that's been brought up, first of all, I want to thank the planning commission, city manager, city planner, even all the public that's come to the meetings. I sat in on all those meetings with the planning commission and listened to all of that, and it was really good to see how well they dug into the ordinance that was proposed and, changes that they suggested being made. I think they did a really good job doing their homework and putting that together. The big question that's come up is, why do we need an ordinance on these types of things? Do we need one? If we do, why do we need it? That was one of the main questions. And I think this is and as John kind of said in a lot of his comments, some of the same things that I was going to say, it's an emerging business. It's something that wasn't out there in the past. I think we want to try to maintain our residential neighborhoods with the character, with what they were intended when they were built. If we end up having a whole bunch of Airbnb, someone buys one here, you could have a street going down there, there's a whole bunch of them lined up. But we need to have some way, I think, of regulating where they're at, or how many there are. I know there's not a limit right now, but there needs to be some type of regulation on what goes on in these places. The noise ordinance won't be any different than what we currently have, which I think that was a good thing that was brought up, because there were some things in other ordinances that said you can't be in the hot tub or the pool after certain hours, which I thought was kind of ridiculous. I can see the need for the inspections. I mean, we gotta make sure somebody's running this out with somebody. It's a public safety issue. I mean, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Callen that, yeah, we wanna make sure. These are just for life safety things that are being inspected, that type of thing. And I know there may not have been a large number of complaints made to the police department, but I think this business is gonna grow, and I think it's good to get on top of it early on. There was an article in the Sacramento Bee, I think last week, that talked about Airbnbs being rented out for parties. People have a graduation party or some type of party, and a bunch of people get together and they rent them out, and they go to this in Gulf, I think, and Elk Grove, some places like that. They've had a lot of problems with them. So I would think that by at least having some kind of regulation on it, we can help get ahead of any problems that might happen here. Other comments, I think that the question on the ADUs, I think it's fair to let them be used as an Airbnb, in my opinion. I don't see the need to really restrict that. I don't think we would have that many of them that are gonna be used for that purpose. I don't know that, but I think allowing them to be an Airbnb, as long as when we build them, we're getting the credit for them on our affordable housing units. If they are something that can be used as an affordable housing unit, or it can be used as an Airbnb, it can be go either way. So I'd like to have that flexibility, but I can also see, if the state's gonna come in down the road, change that, then we can bring it back and address it at that point. I don't think we need to worry about it until they do. As far as notifying your neighbors, the one for the hosted, within 100 feet, you're not talking about very many places around you, and I think it's fair to let the neighbors know that, hey, so-and-so's going to have an Airbnb there, so that they know what's going on. I know I can see issues with some of these, especially a non-hosted one, the parking issue. That parking has been something I've brought up a lot over the years on my time, and John might know. But, if somebody's got a house and they have a bunch of different people staying in there, that's gonna impact the parking for all the neighbors around them. They need to know that there's a requirement to have some parking provided for the guests that are staying there. I think that was good, adding that they could have one on-street parking space. Otherwise, I think, like I say, I think the city's done a good job in putting this ordinance together. I like the way it's worded, other than the part about the ADUs. Currently, in the way the ordinance is written, the ADUs are restricted from being Airbnb, the way I understand it.
Right now.
I think that was the last of my comments, so yeah, go ahead.
I agree with so many of Phil's comments, but I disagree with some, or I feel like we need to just talk a little bit more about this. So if you're the host of an Airbnb, and when you fill out your information, you're asked whether or not you have a fire extinguisher, and you have to have one, and you have to have it, mapped, you have to show where that location is. You have to have all the emergency stuff, like a box for Band-Aids and all that stuff, and you have to tell them. You have to answer questions on whether or not your unit is accessible or inaccessible to somebody in a wheelchair. Airbnb goes to great lengths to make sure that what you say you have is what you have, and that it's safe, and that it's clean, and then at the end of every stay, there is an opportunity for the guest and for the host to evaluate the person. So as a host, I can evaluate the cleanliness of the person that stayed, whether they follow the rules, and all Airbnbs say whether or not you can have a party there, so you can actually say in the language like no parties allowed on this. And so there's cleanliness, whether they were good communicators, and whether they follow the rules, and they also offer service if there is a problem. use that service. I personally used the service and had them spend about $1,000 on a replacement bed that somebody accidentally broke. I don't know what they were doing. But Airbnb bought the new bed. And as a guest, when I use Airbnb, I'm also evaluated as a guest, whether or not I follow the rules of the house, whether or not I was a good communicator and let them know anything that was going on. So to Abby's point, and Abby said, why do we need this? I think that as a host, you probably have inside knowledge that there's already a lot of rules in place. And that those rules you have to answer to every time you have a guest there. So it just felt like as a person who's a host, and a guest, I wanted to add that to the dialogue, that Airbnb builds that in. But as a person on city council, I do see the need for regulation, and I do see the need that, we have to be able to not have disruptive parties or enormous amounts of people staying in a house that might not be safe. I mean, that's the bottom line of why we would need an ordinance. And so, I just wanted to make the comment that there's just more information to it. And I would also add, the last thing is, I think the city of Winters would benefit from having something like a tutorial or a meeting of best practices that they would like to see, that they might not require, that they would like to ask hosts to have. And those best practices can be shared on Airbnb users. I think that would be a really good idea.
That's a good point, because that was discussed actually during the planning commission meetings as far as posting rules. So currently the ordinance, how does it read as far as posting rules or best practices?
You have to post it in the facility where the user would be able to see it. It wasn't something that we would necessarily have to review, but that they would be posted within site. So that when the user went into the facility, they wouldn't have to look for them. And Napa has a lot of this, and I'm not about to suggest that we follow Napa again on this, but they do have a lot of this in written format. Earlier meetings with the planning commission, I shared with them so they could see examples of some of the regulations, some of the restrictions. We could easily come up with some sort of form for people that were maybe venturing in it for the first time. Here's sort of the kind of things that we suggest you consider when you're go into this as a business.
And I also understand that, Airbnb, they have a lot of things spelled out. And we have several other small companies that are doing this, or people that may do it on their own that don't go through those types of companies. And we need to have, I think, something in our regulation, our ordinance, to say, here's what you need to follow. If you're not going to go through Airbnb, whatever, you need, regardless of who you go through, you do it yourself, go to Airbnb, smaller companies, there's going to be rules to follow either way. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Yes.
I want to follow up with comments.
Yeah.
Mentioned you want to see the neighborhoods compromised. Yeah, on the other side.
You're right. What I'm trying to say is I don't want to see a whole street of Airbnbs side by side by side, and then the residential part of that neighborhood, you could have, there's 5 non-hosted houses along one street. Someone came in and bought 5 houses out here and put non-hosted Airbnbs. You have basically running a business out of there, 5 different businesses right there on that street. Your residential neighborhood is not there. People come and go all the time. I don't know.
That's one of the things, if you really delve into this, that's happened, and I would see it happening here. There have been companies that literally go out and buy houses for that sole purpose, is to use them as VRBOs or vacation Valley units. And right now, there's nothing on the books that we have that can stop that from happening. Nothing. And I'm not saying this ordinance is designed to stop it, but at least it puts them through a process so that the city can evaluate it.
I think it probably applies more to the non-hosted ones.
Absolutely, absolutely does.
Okay. Going back to those early grant requests. Quite a complicated bit of paperwork that goes on with it. We're building for so many years. And whatever we built, we can say that we passed.
Yeah, you know, I think probably something we're gonna have to do is do a little bit of research. And it shouldn't be that difficult, but we'll do a little bit of research on some approvals for some of the projects that were included with the grant.
All I have, anybody else? Then, at this point, I will open it up for a motion. They want to go with the way it is, or they want to continue it to a future date? I will open that up.
I'll move for continuation to our next meeting.
20th of August.
I'll second that.
Does that give you enough time to do research and other
Yeah,
things that have been brought up?
as things look like right now, I have time available to do it in that timeframe to get the packet out for the next meeting.
We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we now move on to discussion item number 2. Is resolution 2019-31, designating city officials as primary and alternate representatives to the Yolo County Housing Commission.
Mayor and council, quick items. Yale Housing has asked us to give a designation of an alternate member. Police staff doesn't kind of stick their nose in this, but there are some logistical things which probably make appointing one council member work on this, because there are 2 meetings that are completely back to back. So we need the council to appoint an alternate for the Yolo County Housing Authority. And logistically, Councilmember Callan have a meeting right after. And something that we would probably suggest is that in this case, Councilmember Callan be made the alternate to the Yolo County Housing, as well as maybe Councilmember New being the alternate on the HPAC. Just so if for any reason one of them can't make the other meetings, or one of them wants to go to either meeting, that would just work. So in this case, it just makes, at least for the housing, to make Councilmember Callan the alternate.
So moved.
I think it's a great recommendation. So,
Seconded.
we actually have a motion and a second. Okay. Any more discussion? No. That's fine. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Wait, hold on, wait. We didn't see any public comments? No. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Next discussion item is planning, project permitting, and inspection software upgrade.
Good evening, council. Christine and I are before you tonight, asking you to receive a staff report regarding the upgrade of building permit software to include mobile app capability for field inspections, and to authorize the city manager to execute a contract for the upgrade of the building permit software. And I will let Christine talk to you a little bit about the background on what we're asking you to approve.
Okay, thank you. So we're currently using a 2008 desktop version that has not been upgraded since its implementation in early '09. Many improvements have been added to their current cloud-based software, including interconnection with GIS and government warehouse websites. The benefits to their current software include the mobile app for on-site entry of inspections, which would reduce time spent on handwritten documents, improve workflow to streamline the entry and tracking, process for planning, project management, building permits, and code enforcement. This cloud-based system will provide maintenance and storage by Tyler Technologies. And by joining Tyler Community, which is a client support group, staff can network with others. Other end users. Do you want to speak to this one?
So we spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different software solutions. And I sat in mostly from the dollar and cent standpoint, which I'm sure is shocking you all. And Christine, Christine and Jean looked at the capabilities and the workforce portion of the items. We looked at three. We looked at InterGov, upgrading from the current desktop to a cloud-based version. We looked at Acela, and we looked at Trackit. Christine and Jean made phone calls and talked to several different cities about what they liked and didn't like about the software systems, and it was all over the board. Some people loved them, some people hated them, some people. So I think it was more in that situation of the differences between what they came from to what they went to caused some of the different reactions to the new software. We are, Christine and Jean are proposing that we stay with InterGov. We have the ability of just transferring the information that we already have that's InterGov based from our desktops to send to the cloud system. And so we feel like because they're very similar, the transition should be an easier transition to update rather than going to an entirely new building permitting software. Additionally, the Trackit software in particular was almost $164,000 for the software system. And then they were going to require an annual support of almost $12,000. Acela's price was almost $49,000 with an annual software monitoring of almost a little over $13,000. Tyler Technologies is a one-time fee of $34,000, and that includes the migration, it includes the training, it includes project management. They will host it on their servers. And their annual fee is a $12,600 fee. We do collect it's called CARF, C-A-R-F, for anybody that's pulled a building permit within the city. It's a fee that we collect to pay specifically for technology within the building department itself. And there is funding in Fund 494. We would charge $34,000 for the one-time fee to that. We would charge the roughly $12,000 a year. And there is an escalator cost for that. It's about 5%, which is standard across most of the building permit software systems to that same fund. And we would also purchase 2 iPads, one for our building official and one for the consulting building inspectors that come in and help Jean with the system. We have a quote. Our quote is dated as of July 30th, 2019. And staff is recommending that we stay with InterGov and move forward with that system in order to do some time savings and all the things that Christine talked about, and asking you to authorize the city manager to approve the contract with them. So that will take any questions you might have.
Okay. I'm familiar with the Trackit system, which it's shocking that it's so much more than all the rest. But one of the things that I know comes with the Trackit system, 'cause I know Yolo County uses it, I think, Vacaville's never using it, I believe. You're able, when you're doing an inspection, to go online and schedule your inspection and then see what time your inspector's gonna be there, all that, you can do it online. Does the updated InterGov, is it still gonna be call and ask Gene for an inspection or ask you, or is it actually gonna be able to be online now that it's updated, or?
I believe that might be available through the citizen portal.
Correct. So there's a citizen portal that would allow you to do that. We've had a little bit of resistance to that. I'm not exactly sure why. That is not included in the program the way we have it set up. But if it's something that you feel strongly about, we could certainly ask them to include that into the process. As Jean and Christine were going through that, that was something that a high priority was not placed on. I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, I thought it was kind of convenient and nice because
it can be.
You didn't have such restrictive time limits as to when you could schedule an inspection. As long as you did it before they got there in the morning, you were good. So it gave a little more flexibility for the
customer,
for the contractors and stuff and the homeowners, but you know, that's why I was wondering, is that where part of that big price difference is?
No, I think the citizen portal is about $5,000. So it's not that significantly more. I think part of the issue is that because we have a single building inspector.
Yeah, and that's part of my thinking too, is with only one inspector 99% of the time, it's probably not really that necessary. Where the agencies that I've dealt with that have Trackit, they've got, 3, 4, 5, 6 inspectors, so it's easier for them when they come in and take it off the computer. But I just was curious about that because I've used
When
it.
we got the pricing for Trackit, Jean's comment was, there is no way Butte County paid that much money for the Trackit software. Well, he was wrong, because I called and talked to him.
Yeah,
And
that's crazy.
they did pay that much, and
That's a
that's
huge
just
amount of money.
way outside of our ability to fund.
Yeah.
But the ability for him to take an iPad, to have in his car an iPad and a printer, where he can enter the data into the iPad and immediately print out whatever he needs, whether it's a correction report, whether it's a C of O, whatever he needs, that he needs to be able to give to the contractor or the homeowner or whoever. he's
Yeah,
working
I've
with.
dealt with that in a lot of jurisdictions as well, and it is way nicer than his scribbles on a pad.
And you'll be able to read it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like reading a doctor's writing,
Yeah.
so.
So that is part of what we're excited about being able to do, is move into, if not the 21st century, maybe all the way to the end of the 20th century with some of the technology. And so we feel that staying with InterGov is cost effective, plus there's already a knowledge base there. So they're not going to have to learn an entire new software, which no matter how hard you work at something, there's a huge learning curve when you start something new. And there's still going to be some of the learning curve here, but all of the address files that we scan in and we use with the current system, they'll still be able to use with this system. So what we're really doing is we get an iPad that has a cellular plan. Everything goes up to the cloud. He doesn't have to come back and copy things. He doesn't have to come back and make notes. All of that's done automatically as he enters it into his iPad. And so this is what we're asking you to approve. It does happen to be at this point the least expensive solution, but also again from personnel side of things, the ability to already understand how a lot of the tables and things work is a tremendous help when you switch to software.
Thank you.
I might add too, I got noted, one of my recommendations, it mitigates the risk of losing historical records that during conversion to a different software
Yeah.
might get skewed.
Oh, I've been there too.
And that is one of the comments that I heard from others that had made a change to a completely different brand of software.
I've been down that road. It happens a lot.
Yeah, that would not be
I think it's pretty impressive that we've had this software since 2008.
Yeah.
Because the software world, that is
It's very
a
old.
long time, and it's
Surprised
still
it
working.
functions at all.
That says something about the company. that
However,
it still functions.
Very difficult to find folks that work for Tyler Technology that can still
That can
work on
fix
that
it,
platform.
I think it's very important to upgrade. I think to track it, I guess from what I talked to John and what I'm hearing, the reason it's so much more expensive, it's more for larger cities and that type of thing.
I
Doesn't
agree
really
with
fit the city inside the winters at this point, so. Yeah, I think you've done a lot of work on it and it looks good. I'm fine with what's being proposed. I do like your comments on looking into the part about, potentially adding another part of it. citizen
And we know
portal
we
in the
can't
future.
add that in. The important thing is kind of taking baby steps.
Yeah.
And so we can always come back and ask them to add that portal onto the system once we've got this part of it upgraded and everything's down pat. And then maybe we get staff used to having the ability of people logging in and setting up appointment times.
Yeah, that's trying to justify how do they justify that much more money?
Yeah.
I guess
It
you're
was-
paying for that name, right?
It was very cool. I mean, they had a lot of cool features when we watched the demos. Of course, to me, I'm looking at plans going, can you circle that? And can you do this? That? And where's the dollar stuff in out here? But the Track It stuff had a lot more ability to do plan checks right there in the Track It system itself. But we send a lot of our bigger plan checks out anyway, so
We're not there.
that's not something that we felt we should be paying additional funds for, because it didn't seem like from a cost analysis that was a smart use of funds.
Agreed.
Questions or comments? Anyone in the public that would like to comment on it? No? Okay.
I'll move staff recommendation.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe it's our last discussion item. It is a general plan element review on natural resources.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, this is the sixth in our 9-part series on just giving an overview of the general plan. Tonight we're going to talk about what general plan refers to as the natural resources element. And within the context of the required elements within the state requirements on general plans, this is the one that actually has two elements addressed in it. One regarding open space and the other regarding conservation. If you look at the overall goals of the city's general plan for natural resources, there's some main goals that it hits on. Ideas of water quality, Poudre Creek, Dry Creek, groundwater, agricultural land, protecting sensitive native vegetation and wildlife, the idea of wetlands and the riparian areas, and especially the aquatic ecosystems within Poudre Creek and Dry Creek. It addresses air quality, and then finally, it includes the idea of energy efficiency. So the implementation of this item includes not only programs and policies that the city has, but also, most importantly, how we've been able to collaborate and address most of these issues with outside agencies and our partners. Probably the best example is the Yolo Conservancy, where that addresses everything from animals and various types of species to how we address things like vernal pools and habitat. One of the biggest agencies that's emerging right now, originally it started for us as the Water Resources Association of Yolo County, and it's merged into the Yolo Sustainable Groundwater Agency. That is a huge deal, especially as we look at things not only from groundwater and subsidence, but also the overall water quality. One of the big elements here within this has to do with our goals regarding air quality. And the city is a board member on the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District, which implements not only the state requirements regarding air quality, but also goes through and implements those which would affect the city of Winters. One of the things we heard about tonight in the presentation on resiliency talked about climate and climate action planning. And one of the things that will ultimately be coming to the council will be the framework for moving forward, not only a climate action plan, but also an implementation strategy. That's one of the key things that I think our Civic Spark person is going to be working on for us. One of the biggest elements that we deal with is we have a flood area within the town, which includes mostly runoff from the mountains. Both Moody Slough, Chickahominy Slough represent important watersheds where water comes down. So we actually have multiple stormwater management plans, which not only include the quality of the water that comes off of the streets, but also both the Moody Slough and Poudre Creek storm drainage areas. When you look at our overall natural resources, you can't look beyond many of the things that we've done regarding Poudre Creek. The Poudre Creek Park Master Plan with the implementation of phase 3, which I think was actually the fifth phase of a 5-phase process. But the Poudre Creek Master Plan has been adopted, which includes not only the riparian habitat, the ecosystem, and the various elements which are in that plan, but it also represents a very important recreational amenity, which combines not only the habitat aspects, but also the recreational elements of that. The city's a member of the Lower Poudre Creek Coordinating Committee, the LPCCC, which is part of a overall legal decision which is made regarding water that comes out of Lake Berryessa and down Poudre Creek. The city also participated in many aspects of what is called the Lower Poudre Creek Watershed Management Plan. Is the entire plan, which goes all the way from the dam all the way to the Sacramento River through the Yolo bypass, but it's an important environmental document that included not only Winters Poudre Creek Park, but the entire watershed of Poudre Creek. And most of this is managed. We have our Winters Poudre Creek Committee, which ultimately their main function has not only been in the implementation of the overall Poudre Creek Park Master Plan, but also we have an active Poudre Creek Vegetation Management Plan, which feeds into all of this. When it comes to natural resources, I will share with you that we were the first city in Yolo County to adopt our own habitat mitigation program. We did that back in the day, probably around 2008, where we were the first city to do that as the Yolo Conservancy, used to be called the Yolo HCP process, was working on things. Overall, the natural resources element of our general plan addresses both of those two required elements on open space and conservation, and important element of our general plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just, would you say then that this section of our general plan is okay as it is?
I would think so, but I always laugh when people ask about anything that involves all the environmentalists in town. I'm convinced that environmentalists like to battle environmentalists, so let's just say that we're about 90%. Okay.
And what do we have to do with this and SB, what was it, 379? 379? Yeah, earlier. 379?
Yeah, I think a lot of those things will eventually merge into, as we dig into the climate stuff. It'll eventually get there.
Sarah?
Sarah pointed out that actually addressing most of the items in that involve going into your safety element of your general plan. And I would probably argue, one of the things about our general plan is there has to be what they call the internal consistency. I would imagine that as we go forward in looking at a climate action plan, which involves the resiliency, we will find basically a cross-hatching into both the safety element and this element, which includes most of the things that we talked about as far as climate.
Questions? Anyone in the public who would like to speak to this? Please come forward, Kate.
I just squashed that thing, Kate. If I knew it was gonna go. You're supposed to just point and go. You nailed that thing. Got that.
Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And I'm gonna be really quick so that everybody can get to bed at a normal and reasonable hour and focus pretty much on just respectfully requesting that council ask staff to address when the general plan refresh will be, what it will be, what the opportunities for public input will be. And I asked council to direct staff to have that, have discussion of what the general plan refresh will be on a council agenda, separate from one of the informational items about the general plan elements. That way we could discuss what the general plan refresh will be and when it may be, separately from talking about one of the elements specifically of the general plan. And certainly there's a lot of enthusiasm for understanding more about planning and learning about planning and people wanting to be involved. And I appreciate everything that the council, the planning commission, and staff does on this topic. And it seems like something that there could be a lot of good discussion about. In addition to the upcoming city workshop on the 21st, is that right?
I've got one advertisement on that. I'm gonna play that thing.
Play it big?
It's in like 1 minute.
All right, I won't steal your thunder. So anyway, so that's my request this evening is that council ask staff for an update on that and direct staff to bring that to council separate from one of the informational items about a general plan element. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Anyone else in the public would like to speak? Okay. All right. Thank you for the update, John. See, with our discussion items, we'll move on to the city manager report.
Yeah, just real quick, maybe to respond to something that Kate brought up. One of the items I'm going to be bringing to the council at the August 20th meeting is two really important documents that I've been working on. And they're going to be basically the project lists of what staff and the city is working on. One of them is going to have a general list of all the projects, but also one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to bring the list of all the planning projects that we have that include climate, that include the idea of some type of a climate commissioner or board or whatever. the general plan refresh, all those types of things. So look for that on the 20th. I must tell you, it's a massive project as far as assembling the entire project list. You know, we have 200 oars in the water right now on various things. So look for that on the 20th. Now on the 21st, we have a planning workshop, which will be a joint workshop between the city council and the planning commission. And it'll be from 5 o'clock to 8:30. It's going to be at the public safety facility. We figured there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to show up, and we might as well have a place that's comfortable and everybody can see and participate and do all of that. So what's going to be covered at that workshop? Here's the best news. I'm not going to be presenting it. Basically, we're going to turn that over. I'm desperately trying to get out of this whole planning stuff on many things. But Heidi Schuden, our contract planner, is going to lead something, and we're going to try and hit on a lot of the main topics. The north area, general plan, the idea of annexation, give some absolute status reports on various things regarding planning issues. There's going to be Heidi's working on a pretty comprehensive staff report that's going to go along with this. It's going to be educational in nature. We're going to hit on all the really hot topics of things. We want to make sure that all the information that we have regarding people's concerns regarding things are out there. It is absolutely critical at this point because if we can have maybe a reset on just this, a very common understanding of information, and also one of the things that from that workshop is that from the staff perspective, we're going to be asking for direction from the city council, and it's going to give an opportunity for the public to look at some of the things that we're looking at. They're going to be able to see the project list, and we'll be able to get input from everybody. You know, with the council I mentioned, I met with a number of folks that were concerned about the north area stuff. It was a great meeting. We came there. Honestly, I didn't know that as many people were going to be there as showed up, but it was a very good meeting. And one of the things that I talked about is the workshop on the 21st. Absolutely encourage people to come to the meeting, and it'll be a chance for us to get information out to everybody. So August 21st, the public safety facility, 5 to 8:30.
Is that it?
Yeah.
So I have one item that I would like to actually bring as well. It ties right in with what John has just talked about with planning things. And it's in regards to our current resolution 2001-05. I know that came up earlier this year with some of the, was it a draft proposal that was sent in as an email to the city regarding North Area planning, and there was some discussion whether or not resolution 2001-05 applied or not. That resolution has to do with the city council approval or non-approval on something that's outside of our general planning area. So as I read through that resolution afterwards, I mean, at the time we decided that wasn't something that needed to come before the council, and as I read through it, it looked to me like it wasn't as clear as it could be on what needs to come before the council and what doesn't. So I would like to ask Ethan to look into maybe revising that ordinance or drafting some language that kind of cleans up the fact that it's not just a development project that comes before us. That's outside the general planning area. All projects, whether it's a planning project, development project, could be a project that has to do with flood control, but it's something that's affecting the city, that's outside of our general plan area, that we can draft something up and have some more discussion on that at our next council meeting.
Sure, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Okay. And I think that's all we have tonight, so I will adjourn the meeting at 9:04. Thank you.
Next,